All right, so this is going to be the last of the, you could say, functional or positional description sections. Um, and it's going to be about fourth will or fourth volition, or you could call it unbothered volition or 4V. Okay. And he nicknames it the serf, which is kind of derogatory, but you'll understand that he's just kind of using these nicknames as like quick analogies. So for volition, because there's something to do with like power and like status in society, it makes sense that he would call one V types kings or czars. He would call two Vs like noblemen. I call them freemen, but noblemen, okay. And then for 3V, it's bourgeois. He calls them also Philistines, which doesn't really fit into the scheme as much, but you could say like bourgeois or like uh, tradesmen, townies. And then fourth will would be like serfs, peasants. Um, and the reason why, essentially, um, 4V is the way that it is because um, it's self-doubting or weak or self-negative about volition, and it's others positive about volition. It's accepting of influence from the other. It's flexible, okay, pliable. It's result oriented, so it doesn't really care about processing. It just wants somebody else or something else to give it the result, and so it can move on. Because the fourth position feels easily exhausted, and so it doesn't want to focus or concentrate or devote energy to something that it's very quickly feels exhausted in. So it wants to outsource that energy, or excuse me, outsource that function to other people, or you could even say to the universe at large. So 4Vs often have this kind of demeanor that, oh, everything will work out, that the universe and fate are kind of, you know, they're relatively favorable, to me or to our group, and things will just kind of work out. And so they often have like this, uh, like softening or toning down of ambition vibe, and he'll kind of get into that. So I guess I'll start now. Right after a sip of coffee. Serfs are the nicest people in the world. In their field, it is easy to breathe, like in no other, and not without reason. For example, the soul of the first will meets every idle visitor with the concrete gouges of its eye on the distant approaches. Interesting way of putting that. Uh, the second will is more accessible, but penetration into its rubbery essence also has clearly readable but clearly felt boundaries. The field of the soul of the third will is blurred and makes itself felt not so much by hardness, but by nervous electricity diffused in the air. The fourth will is a different matter. You can pass right through its field, drive in on a tank, there will be no resistance. That is why it is so easy to breathe in the field of the serf. It is discharged. Darwin, with his fourth will, was remembered as follows: whoever was lucky enough to sit at the same table with him, in a close circle of good friends, and especially if his neighbor turned out to be a nice woman, will not soon forget this. With him, everyone felt he behaved easily and simply. He chatted, laughed merrily, joked animatedly, teased but not offensively, but only amusingly and even flatteringly. Moreover, he always treated the guest with respect and invariably tried to involve the new person in the general conversation. Externally, the fourth will is practically no different from the second will. She is characterized by the same naturalness and simplicity of behavior, respect and delicacy of treatment, serenity and openness of view. Really, I myself do not undertake to distinguish a serf from a nobleman upon casual acquaintance. However, as already mentioned, with all their essential differences, the second and fourth functions are outwardly almost indistinguishable. And I think that is true. The picture of the universe that lives in the soul of the fourth will practically repeats the corresponding picture of the first will, i.e., space is a hierarchy consisting of two levels, upper and lower. The difference is that the serf automatically places himself not on the upper level like the king, but on its lower level, assigning himself the role of a flock, a subordinate, a child. Hence, one of the most characteristic features of the fourth will is its untimely childishness, which, due to sincerity and simplicity, one does not want to call infantilism. In principle, the third will is also infantile, but it tries to masquerade as an adult and thus repels. The fourth will does not disguise itself and is therefore very endearing, although there are features in its behavior that can cause bewilderment and shock. For example, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, once under the covers of Madame de Warens, continued to call her mom, although the nature of the relationship obviously contradicted such treatment. Boundless confession is the Achilles heel and the most characteristic sign of a serf. Tolstoy suffered for a long time from the fact that he was unable to write with the sincerity with which Rousseau's Confession was written, and he suffered in vain. Tolstoy, with his first will, was simply not given the ability to write with such reckless frankness, which only the fourth will is capable of. And confession comes easily to her because the serf lacks a sense of personal self-preservation. The will is not the road, the support of the personality, a blow to which could seriously shake his being. For example, Emperor Claudius was able to publicly say at the trial about one of the witnesses, "This is my mother's freedwoman, one of the maids, but she always respected me as the owner. I say this because in my home, even now, others do not recognize me as the owner." And it might have continued there, but I think we get the gist of it. Low self-esteem is an incomparable, priceless gift. It makes the life of a serf easier and cloudless more than anyone else's, and makes a psyche so stable that even time, which inevitably leaves marks on our soul and unscrews the mental mechanism, has no power over the fourth will. When a solid foundation of personality is absent, flogging is an indispensable companion of life, no more effective than flogging the swamp. So no more effective than like beating a whip at the ground. The family is the first of the social units to which the serf entrusts his will once and for all. Age and position in society do not in any way affect his place in the family. Until the end of his days, he feels like a child of his parents and does not even try to become on the same footing with them over time. Two of my friends, men who have already lived and gone gray, still hide their addiction to tobacco from their parents as if nothing has changed since that happy childhood time when they could be punished for finding cigarettes in their pockets. Next, in school. Here the serf stands out for the exemplary behavior of his behavior. Young Seryoja Kostrikov, in parentheses he puts Kirov, shocked teachers with his exemplary, even unparalleled behavior, and was remembered by his classmates for the fact that once at school he said thank you right and left, for which he was nicknamed Thank You. That's funny. The example of the already adult Kirov clearly shows the danger for the serf that lies in his humility, childishness, and sincerity. When a group of delegates from the XYII Congress, that's that's supposed to be Roman numerals, and frankly, I have no idea what that would be. 10, I forget what Y is, and then 2, so no idea. Congress of the CPSU came to Kirov and offered him the post of head of the party. He not only flatly refused, but also informed Stalin about this visit, thereby signing himself and them a death sentence. Okay. Only the fourth will and no other could behave this way. If, for example, the first will were approached with a proposal from the supreme power, she would without hesitation answer, "Of course, it's high time," and would rush into battle. The second will would not have shown enthusiasm for this, but would have agreed, conditioning its consent on the will of the majority of the Congress. The third will would have refused, but it would not have informed Stalin about the proposal, but would have begun a secret probe for the overthrow of the tyrant in the future. Kirov went his own way, the path of the fourth will, and one can say that his death was psychotypically predetermined. Interesting. The example of Kirov is not yet the limit of the suicidal, servile psychology of the fourth will. It happens that the servility of the serfs takes on directly pathological forms leading them to a disease in psychiatry called insanity for two. At the beginning of the 19th century, the following case was recorded in Berlin. A sick elderly woman, convinced that a certain high ranking official was going to marry her, instilled this idea in her husband. Both were placed in the Charité, where the patient soon died, and her husband completely recovered. Doctors initially tried to explain this case as some kind of mental infection, but the spread of this phenomenon in geography soon put an end to the speculation. Regis's monograph, Madness for Two, appeared, in which, in other words, it was said about the phenomenon now known to us, and it cuts off, but basically it's like he's saying that, 4Vs, because of their kind of submissiveness and suggestibility, can easily, especially if they're already kind of like weak-minded, let's say, they can easily be convinced to like go along with a delusion of somebody else who is actually mentally ill. Fourth Will is a zombie, but alive, warm, unlike the classic zombie, The Walking Dead. Therefore, the problem of zombification does not lie in the field of psychotronic weapons. They are useless, and the experiments of the special services have shown that the psyche can be broken, but cannot be manipulated. Almost all attempts to manipulate the human brain remind me of attempts to change files on a hard drive with a crowbar. Anyone familiar with a computer knows what this is. I think this was written in like the early 90s. Modern knowledge is even more unprepared for zombification, since even the location of will in the brain is not known, not to mention the method of influencing it. Attempts by Nazis doctors to find certain crystals of the will in the area of the pituitary gland ended in failure. It does not follow from what has been said that zombies are impossible. Just as they are possible, they exist. There are many of them. Another thing is ... Translation cuts off. Not sure where he was going with that, but the fourth will is the most faithful wife, the most loyal subordinate. But here's the paradox. It is a serf who often looks from the outside like a terrible rebel and frontier. For example, soft as wax Bukharin was considered almost a chronic and almost official head of the opposition to Lenin. Molotov was the only one who openly argued with Stalin, and this despite the fact that both had the fourth will. I assume that this phenomenon can be explained in two ways. On the one hand, in contrast to the Philistine, a crafty slave, searching and extremely sensitive to the requests of the owner of a person, the fourth will is a slave without guile, serving with soldierly directness, insensitive to the owner, often continuing to move on the same course after that as the boss has already made a turn. Hence the split in behavior resembling rebellion. Yep, I can definitely see that. On the other hand, as Thomas Mann said, voluntary slavery is freedom. This aphorism, more than anyone else, can be applied to the fourth will. Voluntary and sincere slavery give her the right to free, direct self-expression of other functions above her, which could well be mistaken for a rebellion if it had any consequences. One can take the rebellion of a serf seriously only by looking at it from afar. It was not for nothing that Trotsky called Bukharin's opposition a revolt on his knees. Internal freedom in expressing one's opinion in the fourth will is in no way connected with freedom in making decisions. As Rousseau complained in connection with family squabbles, to get rid of all this vanity, it would take firmness of which I was not capable. I knew how to shout, but not to act. They left me to speak, but they acted in their own way. The life of the fourth will is the life of a ship thrown into water. The serf is not his own master. His fate is entirely ruled by fate and inertia. Therefore, one day, when Molotov's interlocutor stated that he became a communist, as a result of some consistent and conscious choice, Molotov simply replied, "The wind carried him, so he became. The wind carried him, and he carried him. And then he ended up in exile. There is nowhere to go." In addition to simplicity, openness, and selflessness, the fourth will is distinguished by a sincere reluctance to take on serious responsibility. A Beatles biographer spoke of Ringo as follows: "He is open, friendly, and probably the most likable of all the Beatles. He is not at all focused on himself." And then the biographer cites a statement characteristic of Starr. Regarding his success in the film A Hard Day's Night, Ringo said, "After this film, I received many offers, all for leading roles. I once almost agreed to play the role of Watson in a film about Sherlock Holmes, but then I decided that's still too serious for me. I don't want to take on a role where the main burden will fall on me, at least for now. Can you imagine what a horror if it would fail? But small roles are welcome. I think that no human being has ever been by nature less vain than I am, wrote Rousseau, thereby noting another important feature of the psyche of the fourth will, a sincere lack of ambition. And interestingly, history usually meets the serf halfway in this matter, making him a rare and accidental guest on the starry horizon of humanity. In other words, that, you know, 4Vs are in their self-perception and their effort, they try not to be ambitious, and they don't really have ambition, but um, he's saying that fate of history ends up often putting the 4Vs nonetheless in positions of influence and power. Um, and it kind of makes sense. It's this dynamic, like, when someone is so kind of open and submissive and loyal, there's an appreciation of that person, and they often can be put into positions of leadership, just kind of like lifted up despite their lack of enthusiasm for it, just because they're seen as like a solid, loyal choice, if that makes sense. Uh, do, do, do. The fourth will itself is incredibly surprised when it finds itself at the top of a social pyramid or any serious structure. Darwin wrote quite sincerely, "It is truly amazing that a man of such modest abilities as myself could, in a number of significant matters, exert a significant influence on the views of men of science. I would like to share Darwin's bewilderment. To do arbitrariness over something already established, i.e., you can really change something in yourself and others only if you have the corresponding, more or less solid instrument, will. And when it is made of foam rubber, the manifestation of initiative, individuality, independence, and innovation really looks almost like a miracle." Okay. And now we're kind of getting to a different section here. He's going to go into the I'll get to that, but I'll finish out this part right here before I end the video. The different positions of the will of different nations will be discussed separately in connection with specific psychotypes, but the fourth will itself can be quite confidently attributed to a great many people living in different parts of the world. A common sign for them can be considered that these people were forced out to the periphery of the ecumene, the far north, the far south, distant lands, tundra, desert, jungle, swamps, etc. They ended up in such disastrous places, I think, due to mass complaisance. I keep pronouncing this word like that, but I don't know if that's, complacency, basically, because of the fourth will. The anecdotes beloved by the Russian people about the Chukchi, a docile, timid, naive, and trusting creature, can serve as a powerful argument in favor of such an assumption. Concluding the presentation of the principles of psychosophy, all that remains is to list the mental types generated by it, and whose detailed description the reader will find in the next section. The list of psychotypes looks like this, so I guess I'll read them, but I've decided to skip the type descriptions, at least for now. Maybe in the future I'll go through them. The reason is because it's going to be a lot of reading. And B, I don't really think they're going to be that helpful. There's a lot of literary digressions that I'm not familiar with and a lot of people won't be familiar with. Additionally, some of the types are just described more favorably and others are described quite horridly. So I don't think it's going to help people, and it may give people the wrong impression, where up till now, I think, his writing combined with my commentary, I think is actually helpful potentially for understanding the system, but the type descriptions might, cause you to get a bad idea of the types. If you wanted good type descriptions, then just go to attitudinalpsyche.com and start reading through that, and you'll get good type descriptions that are actually fair. Okay. But I'll just read through these for fun. I'll take a sip of coffee first, though. All right. So he types he gives a for the type that is will, emotion, physics, logics. He gives the name Tolstoy. So that would be the VELF type. Okay. For the will, logic, emotion, physics type, which is VLEF, he nicknames it Socrates. For the VELF type, will, emotion, logic, physics, he nicknames Akhmatova. For the VFEL type, will, physics, emotion, logic, he nicknames I can't. It's hard for me to pronounce this, but Tvardovsky. Um, for the VFLE type, he nicknames Napoleon. For the VLFE type, he nicknames Lenin. For the FLVE type, he nicknames Aristippus. For the FVEL type, he nicknames Chekhov. For the FEVL type, he nicknames Dumas. For the FLEV type, he nicknames Epicurus. For the FELV type, he nicknames Borgia. I think it's Lucrezia Borgia specifically. For the FVLE type, he nicknames Goethe. For the EFLV type, he nicknames Bukharin. Yeah, it's EFLV. Okay. For the ELVF type, he nicknames Anderson. For the EVLF type, okay, there might, excuse me. Yeah, EFLV. Okay, yeah, for the EVLF type, he nicknames Ghazali. For the EVFL type, it says parsnip here, but I think he nicknames it Pasternak, but I'm not sure about that. Yeah, EVFL. For the ELFV type, he nicknames Rousseau. I think it's supposed to be actually like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, but it just says like Rousseau here. For the EFVL type, he nicknames Pushkin. For the LFEV type, it's Berthier, or I don't actually know how to pronounce that. Is it Berthier or is it Berthier? Or Berthier? I'm not sure. For LEVF, he nicknames Pascal. For LFVE, he nicknames Plato. For LVEF, he nicknames Einstein. For LEFV, he nicknames Augustine. And for LVFE, he nicknames Lao Tzu. So I think that's going to be the end of this video, and then we'll start the next one with the introduction to typology, which is pretty short, and I'll save this for another video.